Welcome. You're on the Fringe show. I'm your host, Tatiana Zalan, and I go live every Friday, 2 p.m. Dubai time. The Fringe is about our future, technology, art, and society. I help you to navigate the rapidly changing world so that you too can take advantage of the opportunities in this new digital world. It's episode 63 now, and it was triggered really by a recent announcement by MoonPay. That was last week. MoonPay is a fintech company, and they made this announcement at Art Basel in Miami. MoonPay is rolling out what is called a web3 passport. It's a loyalty program which will be rolled out early next year. And at the heart of this program are the so-called Soulbound tokens, SBTs. Non-transferable digital identities. It's an idea that was popularized by Buterin, of course, the co-founder of Ethereum, Whale and Al Haver in early May this year, 2022. SBTs would enable individuals to accrue permanent, non-tradable records of merits and attributes and store them in a private blockchain wallet. When the paper was written, it was obviously at the concept stage. The paper itself, and I'll put the link in this show to this particular paper, is in the public domain. It's called, let me see how exactly it's called, Decentralized Society Finding Web3 Soul. It's a really interesting title. So at that time, it was all about concepts and lots of mathematical formulas, but no implementations as yet. And MoonPay is coming up with this maybe pilot testing program, so moving far beyond the proof of concept stage. And the key idea here, the key question that I want to explore in this show is, well, is it indeed Web3 passport, and what does it mean for us? As you know, those of you who listen to me regularly, I am very much interested in Web3, in metaverse, and so this is a topic very close to my heart. The usual disclaimer, the views here are my own and they do not represent the views of organizations or employers I'm associated with. This show is for educational purposes only, and that's not investment advice. But before we move into Soulbound tokens itself, let's talk a little bit about digital identity. It's a super important topic, and you will understand why. How big is digital ID market? I don't really have the exact figure for the total market right now as yet, but I have a pretty kind of close estimate of that and a proxy for this, and that's for digital reusable ID. It's a huge market, and a lot of companies would like to have a finger in the pie. The total addressable market right now, as of 2022, is something like 32 billion. And that's for usable digital ID. And that means you can take your ID from one platform to another, and it's also a bridge between your physical and digital reality as well. This market will grow at almost 70% year on year cumulative growth rate, and it will reach something like $266 billion in just 5 years by 2027. So it's a huge market. And what we really need, efficient, safe, and more kind of user-friendly, customer-centric solutions. At the moment, our solutions are very much enterprise-centric and are not meeting customer expectations. We also need interoperable solutions between the physical and digital world. And as I say many, many times, unless we solve this problem of digital identity, we are not going to be really citizens of Web3, let alone metaverse. So what's the problem here? Why is it an important issue that we're looking at? On the internet, as you know, nobody knows you are a dog. That's a famous quote from cartoonist Peter Steiner. He made that in 1993, and it continues to be relevant even now. Our digital identity, if you think about it, is probably one of our most valuable assets. It permits us to access services, execute transactions. It also proves who owns what, right? Digital ID, if you look at the technical definition of that, or more kind of legal technical definition, it's a set of claims made by one digital subject, that is a user like you and me, about itself or about any other digital subject. These claims are asserted truths of a subject. They're also called attributes, and this subject can be a person or thing. We can have multiple digital IDs on the web. And because the internet was built without a native user authentication layer, every provider of digital services have come up with their own solution, with their own workaround, and that resulted in a patchwork of identity one-offs. Private companies, who are now, of course, the gatekeepers of our identity, use multiple online and offline channels, and they build multiple identities of us, right? Over time, our identities fragment. If you think about it, how you get access to this or that internet service, sometimes you use an email ID, sometimes you use a device ID, sometimes a customer login, and so on. And we become a different person, if you will, different persona on each channel. And this is suboptimal for multiple reasons, but particularly for reasons of security and seamlessness of user experience. We're not close to a solution, unfortunately. Even the very framework of digital identity is being debated. Will it be centralized, federated, hybrid, some form of decentralized model like self-sovereign identity? And who is going to work on standards? That's a very important question in itself. Will it be private companies, governments, or independent consortia? Now, let's look at the paper in a bit more detail here. What's the problem that Soulbound tokens are solving? Vitalik Buterin said, and that's what their paper is, one of the opening lines here, because Web3 lacks primitives to represent such social identity, it has become fundamentally dependent on the very centralized Web2 structures it aims to transcend, replicating their limitations. In other words, we're talking about Web3, but we're still relying pretty much on Web2 infrastructure. Some, maybe a couple of examples of reliance on Web2 infrastructure. I'll take an example from the art scene. Most NFT artists rely now on centralized platforms like OpenSea or Twitter to commit to scarcity and initial provenance. DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, if you want to move beyond the simple coin voting, they still rely on Web2 infrastructure, such as social media profiles, and that's needed for Sybil resistance. And because of a lack of Web3 identity, we're unable to support a wide range of financial activities or decentralized financial activities, DeFi, common in the real economy. We can't do under-collateralized lending at the moment. We can't do really simple contracts like an apartment lease. And what SBTs are going to do for us is to provide the basis for a decentralized society, DSOC, as they call it in the paper. DSOC, decentralized society, is a departure from the current hyper-financialized state of Web3. It will become clearer why they think so. It depends on non-transferable social relationships of trust. This crypto world, unfortunately, with the Soulbound, when Soulbound tokens are introduced, we will move past these simple financial, tradable, transferable assets. Let's delve a little bit deeper into the paper and what it says. Now, if we look at what are Soulbound tokens, the key economic primitive of Web3 are accounts or wallets that hold publicly visible, non-transferable, but possibly revocable by the issuer tokens. So these are Soulbound tokens, SBTs. These accounts are referred to as SBTs. SBTs are non-financialized tokens and that linked to a unique profile proving verifiable achievements and commitments. It's still, when the paper was written, was at the concept stage. Now we've moved beyond that. SBTs will be able to track memberships, credentials, affiliations with educational establishments, decentralized lenders, and really other entities. To put it simply, these are tokenized representations of a whole host of possible traits, features, and achievements that make up a person or an entity. And souls can also issue and attest SBTs to other souls. Just to give you an example, well, students will receive an SBT, for example, from a college, and this college in itself could also be represented by a soul, so to speak. What are the use cases that we're talking about? It can be anything from establishing provenance to creating new markets with shared rights and permissions. Just to give you another example from arts. With arts, it's still, regardless whether we have NFTs or not, it still very much depends on the artist's reputation. So the issue of provenance and authenticity has not really been solved with NFTs, no matter what you hear from other sources. But an artist, with the help of SBTs, can issue a linked SBT stored in their soul that attests to the NFT membership to a collection, and that will be the artist will vouch for the scarcity of these NFTs with the help of SBTs. Other applications, well, they can extend well beyond art to services, to rentals, and any market which is built on scarcity, reputation, or authenticity. SBTs could unlock this censorship-resistant, bottom-up alternative to what we have now, and the alternative is top-down commercial and social credit system. SBTs can represent educational credentials, work history, rental contracts, whatever, and they could serve as a persistent record of credit-relevant history. Whale, one of the authors of the paper, elaborated a little bit more about what's the problem that they're trying to solve here. And this is what he said. Right now, almost all the things that happen in the Web3 ecosystem are purely financial objects. They're transferable and saleable wrappers, like wallets of transferable saleable assets, like tokens and currencies, and there's no actual such thing as a person. And all there is a financial holding account. That's according to him. And Whale believes that with social relationship development, financial relationships on Web3 will continue to be really difficult. It's just like a feature of reality that our social relationships are the fabric on top of which financial relationships are built. And a system that's not able to represent that is going to be extremely limited, hyper-financialized, anarcho-capitalist, and so on. In a sense, if you another way of thinking about SBTs is they're a sort of universal aggregation system, and it's not built on the top-down kind of hierarchy in a top-down way, just like China's social credit system is imposed on the population, but it's a bottom-up, community-driven, community-owned system and governed by network users. And as well, it's important to know that you can have multiple souls and you can revoke your soul, so to speak. People would have, he says, like 2 or 3 wallets that represent different, very distinct aspects of your life. You might have one for your health profile, which would be an encrypted and would only have access to doctors or something. You might also have one that represents a financial life, like your CV. You might also have one that represents personal relationships, and those might all be unlinked from each other. And Whale sees Soulbound tokens as bringing the same values of decentralization to real human relationships and real communities. The key element here is that the tokens can't be transferred across people. NFTs can be, but SBTs cannot be. And of course, this idea had a huge host of critics, and one of the critics, not surprisingly, was Fortune. They compared SBTs to the social credit score system in China. Probably they didn't read the paper or didn't bother to understand it's actually built very differently. For starters, they wrote, Fortune, the whole thing sounds similar to China's idea of building a social credit system that would supposedly punish citizens for demonstrating bad ideological behavior. I don't know what they're taking it from, because the paper didn't say anything about ideologies in that sense. Since SBTs are issued to individuals without their consent, the system could be used to brand scarlet letters on people, making the technology an ideal tool for authoritarian states. Surprise, surprise. Other critics also struggle to understand the need for Soulbound tokens. They liken it to a collection of subjective opinions. They think it's just a gimmick that won't pan out. You decide. Maybe there is a grain of truth in that as well. However, there is a very strong response to this criticism, and this is where we need to talk about the differences between SBTs and NFTs. And this is what Whale is saying, that he thinks that people fail to understand, to see the need for SBTs, because we haven't yet seen what a true digital country club essentially looks like, a true membership only. The unique aspect of SBTs that define them and distinguish them from NFTs is the non-tradeable part. You can't transfer it and you can't trade it. It belongs to you, and because it represents you. This will help communities, he said, know that when they take on initially approved members, those members can't simply sell their SBT like is currently possible with NFTs. Soulbound tokens, according to Whale, are a much better fit for this type of thing, because why would you want to transfer an Employee of the Month badge to someone else? You shouldn't be able to do that. What is the killer app, if you will, for SBTs? According to Whale, it's security that will be the killer app. Right now, you have a choice between custodial wallets, and that undermines the whole concept of decentralization, and non-custodial wallets. And these are subject to all these security issues and hacking problems, as we know. The idea with Soulbound is based around community recovery, where your account or soul will be tied to a set of peers, referees, and authority figures who can unlock your wallet. For example, if you had your employer, your university, or your DAO that you participated in, or a newspaper that you wrote for, then the algorithm might choose 3 out of these affiliations and attest that this is indeed you. Whale expects that these Soulbound tokens will really get going when the next upcycle, when the next bull run, probably 2024, with a mass adoption. I think one of the last things that is important to look at is, we have all other identity frameworks. So how is it different from, say, legacy systems? Well, these are IDs mediated by a third party like government, university, employer. And this is very inefficient because it concentrates the power in the issuer or in those who can do due diligence to get stronger verification. And in fact, we're relying on bureaucracies, and these bureaucracies are quite unreliable and inefficient. Then there is this idea, another framework of pseudonymous economy, and that was popularized by Balaji Srinivasan, and that's protection against cancel culture. It's based on transferable zero-knowledge attestations in the wallet, or splitting attestations across multiple wallets. There are great disadvantages when you rely on the ability to spin up new identities as a primary weapon against cyber attacks, and that's one major limitation. Another one is proof of personhood, and that's what WorldCoin is trying to do. By the way, I have a whole show dedicated to WorldCoin and biometrics and use of those for digital ID. They rely on approaches such as social graphs, biometrics, global keys, and so on. Proof of personhood is limited to applications that treat all people the same. And they're, unfortunately or fortunately, the substrate for UBI, Universal Basic Income. What that also means that unless most people on the planet are registered for a proof of personhood service, they're very vulnerable to cyber attacks. And finally, there is a thing called verifiable credentials, and that's currently web3 standard, where credentials or attestations are zero knowledge shareable at the holder's discretion. That is, I might choose what to disclose to whom. And all these verifiable credentials and SBTs work together, and they can be complements, but verifiable credentials have got a key limitation. They don't support most of the applications because of their unilateral privacy. And I think what I also need to mention, since we started with MoonPay, what are they trying to do? How are they going to implement this idea of SBTs? Just a little bit about MoonPay. They're a financial technology company. They build payments infrastructure for crypto. They convert between fiat currencies and cryptocurrencies using all these major payment methods, including debit card, credit card, local bank transfers, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, all these pays. MoonPay is quite active. It's active in more than 160 countries. It's trusted by lots of leading wallets, websites, and applications. They also provide what they call concierge service, which helps high net worth individuals and creators to purchase NFTs and crypto. Their clients include the likes of Jimmy Fallon, Post Malone, Snoop Dogg, and Madonna. So quite celebrities. The benefits of the program, as they explain it, would be related to ticketing for fashion, art, sports, music, and entertainment, and it will be rolled out early next year. What they're saying, they're solving the problem of interoperability. If you could issue a passport to an asset on one blockchain, that would allow it to travel to another blockchain, that could solve this problem. I personally wanted to understand what's the design of SBTs, what's there, but I couldn't find any reliable information. Is it indeed bottom up, or are we still relying on a centralized platform like MoonPay? It's really unclear to me, but maybe that's something we need to explore a little bit further. So just in conclusion, you decide whether SBTs are Web3 passport. It's definitely a pressing issue for Web3, generally speaking, for metaverse as well. And is it a good idea? It's based on NFTs, non-fungible tokens, but are quite different from them in that they're non-transferable and non-tradable. They're built bottom up within Web3 communities, and this is very different from current solutions. And you can have multiple souls, and you can also revoke your soul, your SBT, at any time. Very interesting idea. I thought that I wanted to share with you. What do you think about this idea of SBTs? Well, I'll leave you with this question, and I'll meet you again next time on Friday at 2 p.m. Dubai time. See you. Thank you for joining me.